Few military leaders in modern history inspire as much admiration, controversy, and debate as Douglas MacArthur. To supporters, he was a brilliant strategist and an almost mythic commander who helped reshape Asia after World War II. To critics, he was arrogant, politically reckless, and dangerously independent. What is undeniable is this: MacArthur did not merely participate in history, he bent it. From the trenches of World War I to the beaches of the Philippines, from ruling occupied Japan to being fired by a sitting U.S. president during the Korean War, MacArthur's career spanned the most turbulent decades of the 20th century. His life reads less like a risum and more like an epic. Early life and military formation. Douglas MacArthur was born on January 26, 1880, in Little Rock, Arkansas, into a family already steeped in military tradition. His father, Arthur MacArthur, was a decorated Civil War hero who later became one of the U.S. Army's highest-ranking officers. His mother, Mary Hardy MacArthur, was fiercely ambitious and deeply involved in shaping her son's destiny. MacArthur's path seemed predetermined. He entered the United States Military Academy at West Point and graduated in 1903 at the very top of his class, an early sign of the confidence and intellectual sharpness that would define his career. Over the next decade, he served in engineering roles, worked as a military aide, and gained early exposure to international deployments, including U.S. operations in Mexico. These formative years created more than an officer. They produced a commander who believed deeply in hierarchy, honor, and personal destiny. World War I, the making of a combat leader. When the United States entered World War I, MacArthur was assigned to the 42nd Rainbow Division. During the conflict, he served in multiple leadership roles: Chief of Staff, Brigade Commander, and eventually Divisional Commander. He distinguished himself through aggressive battlefield leadership, earning numerous decorations for bravery. Unlike many senior officers, MacArthur frequently appeared near the front lines, reinforcing his image as a leader willing to share danger with his men. The war cemented his reputation as a gifted commander and accelerated his rise through the military ranks. By the end of the conflict, he had become one of the most recognized officers of his generation, reformer and administrator between the wars. The interwar years transformed MacArthur from a battlefield commander into a national military figure. As superintendent of West Point in the 1920s, he introduced sweeping reforms that modernized the Academy's curriculum and culture, emphasizing leadership, adaptability, and academic rigor. He later served as U.S. Army Chief of Staff during the Great Depression, a period marked by shrinking budgets and political pressure. One of the most controversial moments of his career occurred in 1932, when he oversaw the removal of the Bonus Army, World War I veterans protesting in Washington, D.C. The incident damaged his public image and remains one of the most debated episodes of his life. In the late 1930s, MacArthur moved to the Philippines as a military advisor, tasked with building a defensive force for the islands. Despite limited resources, he attempted to prepare the region for an increasingly inevitable conflict with Japan: defeat, escape, and redemption. When Japan attacked in December 1941, MacArthur found himself commanding poorly equipped forces in the Philippines. Despite determined resistance, Japanese forces overwhelmed American and Filipino defenders. Ordered to leave, MacArthur famously escaped to Australia in March 1942, vowing, "I shall return." The promise became legend. From Australia, MacArthur assumed command of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific. Instead of costly frontal assaults, he pursued a strategy of selective engagement, bypassing heavily fortified Japanese positions while cutting off their supply lines. This approach saved lives and steadily pushed Allied forces northward. Island hopping and strategic brilliance. Between 1943 and 1944, MacArthur's campaigns in New Guinea and surrounding regions showcased his operational skill. His forces captured key locations while isolating major Japanese strongholds like Rabaul without directly attacking them. This methodical advance eventually set the stage for the moment MacArthur had promised since his escape: the return to the Philippines. "I have returned," the liberation of the Philippines. In October 1944, MacArthur landed at Leyte, wading ashore in one of the most iconic images of World War II. The campaign to liberate the Philippines was brutal, costly, and strategically vital. It disrupted Japanese supply lines and restored Allied control over a critical region of the Pacific. By 1945, American forces had reclaimed most of the islands. MacArthur's leadership during this phase solidified his status as one of the war's most prominent Allied commanders. He later presided over Japan's formal surrender aboard the Missouri on September 2, 1945, symbolically closing the chapter on the Pacific War. Ruling Japan, architect of a new nation. Following the war, MacArthur became Supreme Commander for the Allied powers in Japan. For nearly nearly 6 years, he effectively governed the country. His reforms were transformative. Japan's military was dismantled, democratic institutions were introduced, land reforms redistributed power away from elites, and women gained voting rights. A new constitution redefined Japan as a peaceful nation, renouncing war as a sovereign right. Though his leadership style was often autocratic, the results were undeniable. Japan emerged from occupation fundamentally altered, politically stable, economically viable, and aligned with Western democratic ideals. Korean War. When the Korean War erupted in 1950, Douglas MacArthur was appointed commander of United Nations forces, returning him to the center of global conflict. At first, his leadership appeared almost vindicated by history. His bold amphibious landing at Inchon in September 1950 is still regarded as one of the most audacious maneuvers in modern military history. The operation shattered North Korean supply lines, liberated Seoul, and reversed what had looked like an imminent UN defeat. Buoyed by this success, MacArthur pushed north beyond the 38th parallel with the aim of reunifying Korea under a non-communist government. It was here that momentum turned into overreach. Ignoring growing warnings, MacArthur underestimated China's willingness to intervene. In late 1950, massive Chinese forces poured across the Yalu River, launching surprise attacks that overwhelmed UN troops and forced a brutal retreat in freezing conditions. As the war stalemated, MacArthur openly challenged U.S. strategy. He argued that victory required expanding the conflict into China itself, including airstrikes and the possible use of nuclear weapons. These public statements directly contradicted the administration of President Harry S. Truman, who was committed to containing the war and avoiding a wider global conflict. In April 1951, Truman relieved MacArthur of command for insubordination. The decision stunned the American public and ignited fierce political debate. Yet the dismissal reaffirmed a core principle of American democracy: the military answers to civilian authority, no matter how celebrated the general. Final years, an enduring legacy. After his dismissal, MacArthur returned to the United States to massive public support, though political momentum eventually faded. He never achieved the presidency, despite multiple attempts by supporters to draft him as a candidate. He spent his later years largely out of public view and died in 1964 at the age of 84. MacArthur's legacy remains complex. He was undeniably brilliant, fiercely dedicated, and historically consequential. At the same time, his ego, political defiance, and uncompromising personality often put him at odds with civilian leadership. Yet history rarely remembers safe men. Why Douglas MacArthur still matters. Douglas MacArthur's story is not just about war. It is about power, ambition, leadership, and the fine line between genius and defiance. He reshaped military strategy in the Pacific, rebuilt a defeated nation, and tested the boundaries of authority in a democratic system. Few individuals leave fingerprints on history this deep. Love him or criticize him, Douglas MacArthur remains one of the most influential and unforgettable figures of the modern era. History doesn't end when the fighting stops. It continues in the decisions leaders make and the consequences that follow. Douglas MacArthur's life shows how greatness and controversy often rise together, shaping nations long after the war is over. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into history, like and subscribe.